Servus and welcome to another episode of Pro Hockey Pod, episode 84. Coaches series continuing on. No surprise there. As I said before, we've been getting lots of success, lots of good reviews on this, and really enjoying it. Really have enjoyed the guests I've had on, seeing their paths to where they are, and you know, someone who went the NCAA route like myself. It's cool to see the different programs and the rises. And sometimes I've had guys on who've had the new programs too, and how they've built them. So this week. Nothing different. So our guest now, he's been in the game for a long time in the NCAA. He was at Quinnipiac when I was a freshman in college. I joked with him off camera that I actually got my first college win against him. Obviously, he didn't remember that, which wasn't shocking. But after that, he went on to Cornell, which is obviously a very historic program there, and he's now just finished his first season as the head coach at Princeton University. Welcome to the Pro Hockey Pod, Ben Syer.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. It's great to be here today, and certainly looking forward to it.
So it's very repetitive on this podcast. I always start off, I like to go down memory lane. So we take it back to kind of where it all began. So I believe you were born or grew up in the Kitchener area there. Like, what is your first maybe childhood memory of growing up in that area?
Yeah, so I was actually born even in a small town outside of. I was born in Kitchener, but raised in a small town called Maryhill, and it was in Woolwich Township, which is probably the biggest town in Woolwich is Elmira, and some might know St. Jacobs in the local area, but that's where I remember skating with my dad, my mom, for the first time actually in St. Jacobs. And I don't remember skating as much as I remember that the Zamboni was not a Zamboni, but it was a tractor with the Zamboni on the back of it. And so hopefully there's a few people on this podcast that are old enough to remember that. There's probably many that aren't, but certainly dating or showing my age a little bit.
I definitely can remember that because my whole family, apart from me, basically grew up in Elmer, Ontario.
Okay.
So close to St. Thomas there, which I know you played for
Yeah.
eventually. But so like again, Elmer had like a junior C team or whatever when I would go visit my grandparents, and it was kind of the same thing. They didn't really have a Zamboni; they had that tractor kind of setup, which is very common there since it's a very big farming town and community. But what kind of drew you to the sport of hockey first? Obviously, Kitchener has the OHL team. I grew up originally in Peterborough, so I was attracted to the Petes, and that kind of brought it to me. Was it a similar scenario for you, or was it maybe like one of the junior B teams that your dad would take you to games to?
Yeah, you know what? I think it was probably all of it. I think certainly went to a lot of Ranger games on Friday. That's what kids did. And I was actually fortunate at I'd say a younger age. I wasn't crazy young, but probably grade three, grade four, grade five. We had a good family friend. His name was Sean Burr, played for Detroit and a couple other NHL teams, but really cut his teeth with Detroit. He's since passed away, but was a player for the Rangers and a great player. He ended up being a first round pick in '84, and so to be around not just Sean but his parents. I still remember his father Jerry going to games on Friday and him having a real significant impact just on me, how he watched the game, how he interacted with his son. So to me, it was watching the game and seeing the different players that were part of it, but really also to see the interaction between Sean and his father, and his sister and his mom, but his dad and him had a special relationship, and I think that really stuck with me, growing up with two teachers. That there was really an impact that could be made in terms of conversation and how it really impacted and created a family atmosphere. And so I think that's what really drew me to the game is that it was a way of life, and that stayed with my family for quite some time, as I played and as we went to different games and things evolved.
Yeah, those are definitely very important relationships to have at a young age, and obviously, influence us for the majority of our lives. With your minor hockey kind of path, like were you playing for the like I don't know if they were still called the Rangers back then, the Junior Rangers, whatever they might have been. Like, did you grow up in that system, or were you playing in smaller towns and then eventually shifting over?
Yeah, no, I played in Kitchener, and actually, they every team always started with a K. So even the Comets that start with normally would start with or be spelt with a C. They spelt it with a K. So this was before the whole organization moved over to the Junior Rangers. So I played all the way through that right up until midget hockey before I got into playing junior B in Kitchener, who at the time was called the Dutchman.
Yeah, the old Dutchman. I went to a junior B camp there when I was younger before I played tier two here. But
Yeah.
did you so like we brought up like kind of how we both had the growing up in towns with these major junior teams, and as you would know, back when you were growing up, I would believe, and for me it was the same. Like there was a lot of focus on that route, like the major junior route, because it was, kind of the big thing. And I didn't hear much about the other route until later in my life. But had you ever thought about the major junior route?
Yeah, I was always a little smaller than everybody else, like and so I was a late developer in a lot of different ways, and so I knew that it would always be, a challenge to go down that road, and so that's where I thought of it. But I also saw, like I shared with you, my experience with a couple of the Rangers and watching them grow up and different things and seeing that, and so. It wasn't necessarily my main focus here. It was just enjoying the game as much as anything here, and enjoying my teammates and getting a little bit better, but also enjoying the group that I was around year in and year out.
How was your adjustment, I would say, to when you made the jump there to the Dutchman to the junior B ranks?
Yeah. Oh, it was fun. It was, this is going back a few years ago. It was certainly a challenge. It was a lot of fun. Back then, the bulk of our team was from the Kitchener area. We had a few guys that had come in from out of town, but a lot of guys I already knew had played with or closely against. So I knew a lot of the guys. I think probably a handful when we went to high school together as well too. So it was fairly seamless just in terms of that transition. So it was a lot of fun.
You also played for a team that, like, I have a family friend who was a diehard fan. He probably saw you play, to be honest. He'd been going to the games before he passed for 30, 40 years. But the St. Thomas Stars there, obviously, like for me, when I think of junior B hockey, they're one team that really stands out to me. Maybe that's biased just because of this guy, but um, back then, were they kind of still as historic as like they might are now?
Yeah, the year that I had a chance to play with them, the Joe Thornton was on the team. I always chuckle. We used to have agents and scouts in the stands for practice, and the rest of us all knew what was going on, and Joe was just happy to play. Brian Wilsey, who had a really good he had a great pro career, but a great career in major junior. Now works for the Avalanche. Was on that team, and so it was it was a great team.
Do you joke with Thornton there that you helped him get to where he got to?
I just tell him that I helped him with his beard, So, but yeah, no, I haven't had a chance to chat with him in quite some time, but he was quite a player then.
Yeah, I just was like looking up his stats there. Like you even sees at a young age, like he was putting up tremendous numbers, and for his time, like he had everything they were looking for. Like he had the size, like could have that grit, and then he also could score. So, um, the next part of this, so like I've had to do a little bit of research for this. I'd have to say you're one of the harder guests I've had on in terms of research because there's a little gaps
Sure.
here and there, and luckily,
Yeah,
luckily Princeton filled some in for me with their
sure.
bio on you. So I believe after St. Thomas, you ended up attending the University of Western. Um,
Yeah,
did you also play hockey when you're there, or were you just a student?
yeah. I was just a student there. I played junior hockey while I was there, and then The reality of it was is I thought I would be just a teacher like my parents. I grew up with two parents. One was a high school teacher, one was an elementary school teacher, and that's the path that I thought that I would get into, and started tracking that way. And as things progressed, I just happened to through a minor hockey contact that was coaching at Wilfrid Laurier at the time. I ended up getting down to Ohio University and doing my master's down there. And that was kind of as I continued to progress my education, had an opportunity to work with their program there, and the other assistant coach that I was there with was Dan McKinnon, that works with the New Jersey Devils now. And the head coach at the time was doing his PhD, and is a professor at Ohio University, but he was originally from London, Ontario. And So that's kind of how we got there, and kind of filling in that little bit of a gap for you there as well.
So when did you head to Quinnipiac then? Because like online it says like the years and stuff were kind of separated, but then when I went on the Princeton website, it said you were there earlier, and obviously back then they were in a different division, and you guys were able to win a MAAC championship. But when did you first go there, and like how did that opportunity come about for you? Because obviously, to get into the NCAA as an assistant coach, like that's obviously a big step, and I'm just curious how you got there.
Yeah, yeah. So when I was done wrapping up my master's at OU, I started, to look at some different opportunities and things like that. And at the time, Quinnipiac had just finished their first year in the MAC, they called it, and they had a job that was available. I think it paid a grand total of $2,500. And I really looked at it as just an opportunity to look at it as an internship in a lot of ways. And I was fortunate; my parents were able to help me a little bit that first year just to kind of get off the ground. And kind of ran with it. And so I owe a lot to Rand for giving me an opportunity. They had an athletic director there at the time, Jack McDonald, that was really instrumental in getting the Quinnipiac program off the ground and really leading it to where it is today. He set that foundation, that's 25, probably 27 years ago now. And so, yeah, I was really fortunate, but took a little bit of a leap of faith. It probably wasn't the smartest economic decision I've ever made in my life, but was certainly very fortunate.
Calculated risk, I would say. And that's like, I've
Yeah.
said this on the podcast multiple times, and guests have said it too, that the reason some people, I would say, don't make it in the hockey coaching world is because they are expecting to maybe get a certain salary earlier. They're thinking more in terms of money, where you yourself saw it as, hey, this could be an internship. Yeah, it doesn't pay much, but I get my foot in the door. I get to learn. I get my name out there. And, obviously sitting here today, I think you'd look back and say it was probably the right move given the career you've
Yeah.
had. But yeah, like it's just I respect the people who do that, and I think maybe I can relate to it because I've had to do it in Europe. But like normally those people, and maybe you can comment on too, like with your experience, but the people who aren't there for the money, like they're willing to do the extra work, like put in the long hours because they know that down the road it's going to pay off and only bring positive impacts to the program and also them themselves.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also, I think for me, as I said, I grew up with two teachers, and that's what I knew. And teaching hockey schools and coaching at a young age, and that's what I really enjoyed. I knew I had a lot to learn, but at the same token, I really enjoyed those interactions with the players. I really enjoyed the recruiting and the relationship piece in that process. And so I never really looked at it. in terms of the money, probably until I got serious with my wife. We had been dating for a while, and my future father-in-law sat me down and was like, "How are you going to help take care of my wife and or my daughter?" And then I realized that I had some work to do to get his approval, but you know, up until that point, and even to this day, is that um, you know, certainly everyone has to make a living and so forth, but it really has always been about, you know, the group, the development of the guys, and you know, I try to continue that thought and that mindset year in and year out, and I really don't think that's changed a great deal, you know, in the 25 or I don't even know how 26 years that I've been doing this now. So
One other thing I wanted to talk about that is I believe in those like early years at QPAC as well, like you were in charge of like recruiting, like you were the recruiting coordinator. And, this is back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So like things like, sport contract, Instat, like the computer access, the online access that we have today didn't exist yet. So how did you like maybe plan your scouting trips or, communicate with parents or advisors, whatever it might have been, or recruiting? Like how was the recruiting process back then for you?
it was a lot different, and it's probably even really hard to explain because back then too, you were only allowed to call somebody once a week, you know, so I could only call Andrew once a week. Now they could call you and so forth. Email was obviously a thing at the time, but it wasn't probably as prevalent. There was no text messaging. Um, so I would say that it certainly was a slower process than it is today. But I think in that you're also forced to make a lot of relationships and get to know a lot of people that are vouching for that individual and that individual player. And so when you ask how I would plan things, you know, I was very fortunate. I've always worked on great staffs. I alluded to working with Rand early on, but also one of our other assistants at the time was Kyle Wallach. One of our volunteers was Duncan Fletcher, who was from out west, but Kyle is still in the game. Division three school here, Albertus Magnus. Scott Robson was another one of my partners. He's still in the game. He's scouting. He scouted in the NHL for a long time and is now scouting for a team in the Q. And so I've been fortunate to be around a lot of guys that were really involved and. So to communicate back and forth and share different ideas and kind of I hope that we chase the right guys and not just the right player, but the right person for the program at that particular time.
I'm sure too was building up like a lot of trust with some of these contacts who might be, whether it's coaches in certain junior leagues or like you said, volunteer members. Because as you like alluded to, like it was way different back then. I'm sure you had a massive, like maybe like one of those books that just had all the names and numbers in it because you just had to keep everything on file that way.
Well, it's funny you say that because it's one of the guys I recruited is on staff now at Princeton with us, Connor Jones, and he was actually kind of joking with me. He goes, Benny, I remember when you used to carry a binder around, and literally it was it was huge, and the first part was the guys I would call and needed to call once a week. Then I had kind of the next list of guys that were divided by did you play in the OJ? Were you in the Golden Horseshoe? Were you in the BC League? And so forth. So there was different dividers and so forth, but the binder was huge. It needed its own briefcase to be carried around. So it's certainly changed in a few years since then.
Yeah, that's definitely that makes me laugh. But yeah, it's crazy how
Yeah,
far it's come today. As I mentioned, I just briefly want to get a humble brag in here that
yeah.
yeah, I you know, you wouldn't remember this historic moment because those things just fly by. But I remember playing. I think it was my third or fourth start in college hockey. We played in QPAC, and somehow I got a win. You guys had such a good team. I think we won 4-1. But I just remember the like I loved the logo there, and I remember that rink. Like I think it was fairly new.
Yeah.
very loud fan section and stuff. Like it just seemed like, and obviously they went on a couple of years later, like went on to the national championship there and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like game. And like it just seemed like a great place to work and also for the players. Like it seemed like they had a great, surrounding around that team.
hmm Yeah, I love my time there. I was there for 12 years. The people there are phenomenal. Still to this day, stay closely in touch with many of them. And Rand and his whole staff have done a great job to really build the culture in terms of really, putting hockey on the map at Quinnipiac.
What led to the transition? And obviously after your time there at Quinnipiac, you end up going to Cornell, which is a very historic program. When you think of college hockey, sent a lot of guys on to pro hockey after. And obviously, like I remember as Niagara, we would always play them as like an out of conference game and go there and do the Colgate Cornell kind of weekend. And I remember, my freshman year again, I think Ben Scrivens was a senior. This might have been the year before you went there, but I remember like just we come on the ice and the whole rink just has newspapers. Like nobody cares that we're coming on the ice and just another great atmosphere. But how did that kind of opportunity come about and what was the reason for, making the change to Cornell?
Yeah, I think at that juncture, I'd worked with Rand for a long period of time and really enjoyed it. And um, I don't know that I was necessarily seeking, another opportunity, but I did wonder what it would like to work at like a different school. Like I've been working with scholarships at Quinnipiac, and then to have some diversity and working in the financial aid and at a high academic school to be able to bring some diversity. The other part of that, in full disclosure, I lost my mom that year. And so it got me a little closer to my dad. He was able to come down on a regular basis. So there was a personal side and a professional side to it. And so it was a really hard decision. Like I said, I was really close and still am to this day with many people at Quinnipiac. My wife was working at ESPN at the time, loved it there. And so it was a different transition, but a different opportunity that kind of presented itself and seemed like the right time to be able to make that switch where our family was at and things like that. But it was certainly a difficult decision for us to make and created a whole new I guess wagon of memories and experiences that we had for I think 13 or 14 years in Ithaca.
Sometimes those personal decisions, maybe hard decisions, at the time they come out of nowhere, but in the end they end up becoming something very positive, as you mentioned. And I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm happy that you
Yeah.
got to go somewhere where, your dad could be more frequently around, which obviously he would have needed at that time. And um,
Yeah.
how was it working with Mike Schaefer? Because obviously, like he's been there for such a long time and just like a historic figure in that program.
Yeah, I mean it was fantastic. I mean to see somebody show up to work every day with the purpose of how are we going to make our group of guys better? How are we going to make our culture better so that we can, have a chance to compete on the national stage, whether that was in the middle of May or whether that was in the middle of November or, in a playoff stretch, it was the same. And so it was great. He challenged you every day. Fortunate to work with a great staff during my whole time there and be around guys that were hungry to want to get better. And so really enjoyed and feel very fortunate that I was able to work with Shay for as long as I did.
I mean, obviously I would say the connection that you and him had, like the maybe the philosophies that you were able to to have together to create the or to build, sorry, the teams you had every year and create the hardworking environment. Like you guys had a lot of in your 13th season there, like you had a lot of success at Cornell. Like you as I mean as the team, like you guys, I think you had three ECAC regular season titles and one postseason championship, and you guys reached the NCAA tournament 7 times and also 4 times to the regional final. So that's like a lot of consistency. And when you look at that kind of data, you as a coaching staff would be able to look at it and be like, okay, like what we're doing here, like it's working. Like there's enough statistics here to show that we're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you said it there as a consistency piece, and that was something that we were striving for, on a regular basis. Is you always have a different group from year to year, but if you can find consistency in what is expected and what is the standard, you're going to get similar type results. Maybe with a different group of guys, maybe a little bit of a different roadmap, but ultimately getting to the same result. And that's certainly something that we try to do year in and year out. And I think for the most part, we were able to do that. We had some years that were probably a little more challenging than others, but during that time, we were really fortunate that we were able to get some not good guys, but some really great young men to come to Cornell. And it's a story program, as you alluded to, and there's been great players and great guys that have come through that program for a long period of time. But that was something that we really tried to do on a consistent basis. And I really feel fortunate that, my time with Topher as an assistant coach, Topher Scott, and then Sean Flanagan working closely with them. Really felt that we tried to do a really good job in communicating between the two of us, whether it be Sean or whether it be Topher, to be able to really try to get high character guys in there, and feel really fortunate that we were lucky to get some really great guys there.
One of those great guys that we talked about off camera, obviously someone that I had trained with for years there back here in Burlington. He's obviously doing well now in pro hockey is Jeff Malott, and we talked about just kind of his work ethic, like a very good person as well, very nice, easy going, very approachable, and then like just having that family background too. Like his brother's obviously having success in MMA, and then his one sister there was like a skating coach for a while. So like just recruits like that, I think it makes it easy to see like why you've had those very good character, but also competitive recruits and guys that end up going to Cornell.
Yeah, for sure. And Jeff, it's funny that we, that you had an opportunity to interact with him and train with him. Is that he's one of those stories that I've shared a lot of times, is that Jeff was a good player, and probably a little bit of a late bloomer because he's only gotten better with time. But one thing that hasn't changed, and I give a lot of credit to his parents, is that he's not a good kid. He's a great kid. And, he's a guy, like, and people don't see this all the time, but like his senior year is when COVID hit. We were number one in the country. I think we were like three in the pairwise. And so along with his teammates, and there were some other guys in there that were and still playing, having great success, kind of got things pulled away from him. And what people don't understand is that he put a lot of trust in his teammates, us as coaches, in the program, because he wasn't playing on the power play. Year you're not playing, you want to sign a pro contract, but he was so dynamite, in all aspects of his game. And you alluded to the consistency. He was consistent, and he signed a pro deal. And as a result has earned every opportunity that he's gotten. And it's not surprising because, as I said, he's just a great teammate. And it doesn't surprise me. You see him playing in the playoffs now with the Kings, is that he always trusted the process. He was grounded, and that type of person, that type of character, it leaks out into your locker room, and we were lucky to have him as part of our group.
No, for sure. And like I said, I'm happy to see that he's had the success he's had. And, it doesn't surprise me by any means seeing how that guy worked in the gym and on the ice. But
Yeah.
one other thing that I thought was very cool, like throughout your career, and to be honest, I didn't really know much about this award, so maybe you can talk about it. But in 2018, there you end up winning the Terry Flanagan Award, which is given out to like an assistant coach that just has put in tremendous work. Basically, is to sum it up. But maybe talk about winning that award and like what it meant for you.
Yeah, it was a real honor, because to be honest, at the time, as you work at this, you don't know always when your opportunity may come to be a head coach. And so it wouldn't be just one guy, but I had a couple guys probably along the way that I had great deal of respect, that I thought were tremendous coaches, and they were assistant coaches at maybe one program, maybe multiple, but they did their job um, at a high level all the time, and did it with tremendous character, and so to be looped in and lumped in with some of the guys that were on that, from Dave Peters to Brian Hills, who just retired from RIT, and see what they have done. And there's more. But you go through it really. Reflect on the character of what Terry Flanagan did, as an assistant coach, and some of the guys that he was bringing to the teams that he was associated with before he passed, and so it was an honor to be recognized by your peers in that regard, and it's something that I'll be forever grateful.
Hopefully, it's the plaque's hanging somewhere or sitting somewhere in your house there. But no, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, it's anytime you can win any type of award and be recognized for your countless hours in the sport. I think that's obviously a tremendous honor, and you would, I think, agree that it wasn't just you. You'd have like your fellow coaches and everything helped you get there throughout your career. Um, one other thing I noticed about like kind of your career, and like for me being a Canadian, I'm not very familiar with it. So if this is it's not the best question, I'm sorry. But what
Yeah.
were these other teams that you were coaching like kind of at the same time that you've been at school the past couple of years, like these USA like S15, S16, X17 teams? Like is that just like tournament teams, or is that something like a showcase? Like what are those teams? Because you've been doing it for the past 5, 6 years.
Yeah, so they're the same way that you would look at like Hockey Canada. It's the same way. It's under the umbrella of USA Hockey, and so everybody. Well, I shouldn't say everybody, but I think most would recognize the development program for the U18s and the U17 team in Michigan. But every year they host it, and they've done it the last number of years. In Buffalo, and so there's a group of 17-year-olds from different districts throughout the U.S., 16s throughout the different districts, and same with 15s, and so they put these teams together, and you get an opportunity to go coach a group of guys for that week, and you get to know them pretty well. You compete against other teams. And the last couple years, they've actually gone back at the 17 level to have like, districts. So New York State had its own team, and I was able to coach that the last couple of years. And you would compete against California, or you would compete against Atlantic District or Southeast or Michigan. And so it's been a lot of fun to work with those kids, to work with a lot of great coaches from the college level, some major junior coaches. They're all U.S. Citizens, and so you're able to work together and be able to learn, but also be able to get an opportunity to not just learn from the other coaches, but also learn and coach some of the top players in your particular district as well too.
I think that would be also good for like one of like networking, like you're seeing different coaches from whatever various programs or levels. And then as you know, today it's all about like seeing players live. Like you'd be seeing players that could be potential recruits for down the road. So you kind of get a first taste of them, see what they were at this age, and then you can compare maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So obviously that seems like a very good setup there, and that it's run really well. Um, you just finished your first year of being a head coach in NCAA. You know, we talked about it like it was 20 plus years as you as an assistant and working your way up, and you go to a historic school with a lot of history like Princeton. How did that opportunity how did that opportunity sorry come about, and how was the transition for you? Like you're finally sitting in the big chair now, so how does that feel?
Yeah, they had reached out at the end of last year, and honestly, it wasn't something that I was looking for. But as the process went along, certainly enjoyed my conversations and the people that I got to know at Princeton. And so when the opportunity came along, and I'm very fortunate. My wife has been always more than supportive, although she's smarter than I am. I shouldn't say that out loud, but she certainly is very supportive, and so it was a great opportunity to go to Princeton, and been very fortunate to have the support of John Mack, the athletic director, and Chris Brock, his deputy athletic director, and so it's been great to be surrounded by some great people. And I think it certainly, you mentioned kind of changing chairs a little bit is, I do think there are some things that do change when you slide one chair to the left or the right. But I think there's also some things that also stay the same too. And so there's new challenges every day. It certainly was different challenges that I had been used to in the last, you kind of get accustomed to what your routine is for the last, 20 plus years. And my routine changed, I used to wake up every day, where am I going recruiting today, or where do I need, like that was the first thing on my mind. And not that that is gone, but I also, know as well that as much as is important where we need to go and get our new recruit, is that our best recruits are sitting in our locker room, and we got to develop those guys and continue to enhance that culture. And so it's mending the new with the current, and also to be able to connect and be connected with our alumni group, which is so important to the history and the tradition and the success of Princeton hockey as well.
And speaking of Princeton hockey, like I'm always curious for someone who takes over programs or has experience like you do. Obviously, there's an academic part to this when it comes to recruiting players, but what types of, players, athletes are you looking to recruit at Princeton? Like how would you say you're trying to build your teams?
Yeah. Well, we want to have guys that have tremendous spirit, and I think spirit comes in slightly different forms for each guy, but really that's the flat out desire to want to win. Like some guys they turn it on when they get to the rink. Some guys are going all the time, like they want to win at ping pong, or they want to win at foosball, in the common area, but it's to have that constant, compete and desire to win. And so that's, first and foremost. We've talked a lot about, great kids. And that is critical, is we want to have great people associated with our program that want to compete and want to push themselves and be around those that are pushing them. And so I think those are really the two areas that really pop. And I think with that, I think that goes without saying is that they have to be at a certain skill level, like we want guys that really appreciate and know what Princeton is in terms of an institution. There's a reason why it's the best institution for the last 14, 15 years in the US. You have to have an appreciation for it. It's not by accident. the however piece, and it's not a but, it's a however, is that, just your passion is why you're doing the podcast, why you've been a player and so forth, is you have a passion for the game. And we want our guys to be able to, you know, have that opportunity to continue their passion, at the pro level once they're done at Princeton. So finding that right balance of individual with that skill set, but that real passion to continue, beyond Princeton and finding the ultimate success at Princeton, both on and off the ice is certainly critical.
Would you say too, like, throughout your career, like I would say if anyone who's doing the research, you've been very known for the teams you've been on having very strong defensive teams. So like when you're also recruiting these players, are you looking for guys who like play, we will say two-way, like they play the 200-foot game?
I Yes, but not just like I think I think that's kind of a perception. I mean, we want guys that want to be able to score. Like there's some guys, if you go back, that have had a chance to recruit that just flat out love to score goals, and they did. I mean, Brian Leach that played at Quinnipiac was a guy like that. Benny Nelson was a guy like that. I think one of the things that when you get into the defensive side of things, or perception that I've been tied to, I think it goes a little bit to the history of Cornell. But I also think that it's the things that provide consistency, is that you can control your 200-foot game if you have that compete, that urgency, that desire. I firmly believe that you can, and you can control whether you're getting scoring opportunities because you're working hard to get into the right positions, but you don't always have, the control whether you're scoring or so forth. And so it's to be able to just find those people that are flat out committed to playing the game in an honest way. So it's not just finding guys that are good defensively. Don't kid yourself. We want guys that can score and be effective on the power play too.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. I just kind of meant to like, there's some people I've talked to where they're like, you know what, like we love the goal scorers, but we also want them to be responsible on our own and like kind of that 200-foot game. Like, so I was just curious, like on, as you mentioned at Cornell, especially, you guys are very known for your defensive game and, obviously starting with good goaltending. I remember Scrivens being there. Andy Isles had a good career for being the size he was. Like, that kid could play bigger than he was.
Yeah, exactly.
Another thing that I think's like fairly new when we're talking about recruiting is the new rules. So obviously now I've been asking a lot of coaches this, like, what are your thoughts on the new recruiting rules in terms of major junior players? Because obviously when we were growing up, we didn't have this. You had to choose one path or the other. Where now it's you're going to see a lot of kids maybe going to the O or whatever major junior it is until they're 18, 19, and then they're going to say, hey, I want to go to school and continue developing or see a new route. So what, like, how does that kind of change your recruiting process? And what do you think of the overall new rule?
I think overall, I think it's a great opportunity for more players to be able to pursue, you know, the college route and to be able to have an opportunity to lengthen their runway and to get a great education. Because I've always thought that, people always would compare college to major junior for so many years, and the reality of it, the timing of it was never the same, and so it wasn't really comparing apples to apples. It was different, and kids had to make decisions that, sometimes weren't always fair, to the individual. And so this way that's taken out, you've lengthened your runway a little bit, that you have an opportunity to go play major junior, but then you do also have that opportunity to go to school. I do think that how it's changed is that, I think if the major junior player really wants to have success, at college, I think they really have to understand the value of taking care of their education in high school. I think that's really important. I think that'll change over the next couple years here, as I think there's some tremendous students that play our sport. And I'm not just talking about like at the Ivy League. I'm talking about just generally as a whole. I just think it's really important to be able to really put an emphasis on that, and to be able to have classes of rigor, being in four core classes, the 4 years, even if you're in Kitchener and you're on a bus, or and have to go to Saginaw or Flint or thing, you still have to be able to do that schoolwork, and be able to show the that you can handle that rigor along the way. And so I think it's I think it's fantastic. I think it's certainly a dynamic shift. There's been more changes that have gone on in our sport, in the last 12 months, and probably in my 25, 26 years in doing this. But I think it's great for the players that are involved, and it's only going to enhance and improve the game over the long haul.
Yeah, I'm very curious, like as I said, like maybe like when you have a stronger sample size, when you look down the road in 5 to 10 years, like, you see right now, like a lot of the 20-year-olds in major junior are now taking advantage of this. Like they're committing to these schools, and um, as you said, it's different. It's like not comparing apples to apples. So I'm very curious, like how the experience goes, and um, yeah, like I think too, like with the tier two junior leagues, it might hit them a bit because now like kids that they might have gotten where they would have stayed in those leagues because they wanted to go NCAA might make the jump to major junior. So yeah, very curious to see how it goes, but I'm sure it's a new fun experience, and for you, it opens up a new window of players to look at.
Absolutely, and I think you'll see some dramatic shifts, like you just said, whether tier two teams end up going, the major junior route, how kids choose different paths and so forth. It's certainly going to be unique over the next number of years here.
Two more questions for you here. The last one I'm going to combine two because I feel like the answers are going to be similar. But given your long career in NCAA, I feel like you enjoy what you're doing. But I wondered, like, do you have any aspirations down the road for maybe the pro game or any future goals, or are you just continuing to enjoy the ride and be where your feet are?
I think the last part, I think I am enjoying where my feet are. I think, uh, there's so much involved day to day, and to be interacting with I won't just say young players. It about like guys that are so hungry and so driven and so focused. It's fun to be around. And it's not just guys that want to get better on the ice. It's guys that, are taking care of their academics, and then, translating it also on the ice. Like I love it, it's been great, for my family. My kids have enjoyed, the atmosphere and being around, the rinks on campus, and the atmospheres that are associated. My wife has worked on campuses, for the last, 14, 15 years as well too. So it's certainly not something that is on the forefront. It's just enjoying where our feet are at right now and trying to make things better where we're at.
I always tell people too, like I would say I'm jealous, but also like have a lot of respect for the people in the NCAA side of things because there is a lot of longevity to it. Which leads me to my two-part question here or two-part statement, I'll say. But I always end the podcast on what is one or multiple pieces of advice you'd give the younger generation out there, and I wanted to also incorporate in if you have any secrets to working in NCAA for so long, because obviously, as you mentioned, you've been doing it for whatever it's been 25, 26 years. So we'll kind of put both those questions together and just kind of let you share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, I think, one of one of the biggest secrets in working in the game. I don't know if it's a secret, but I alluded to it a little bit before, as I grew up thinking I'd be a teacher, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy working with not just our staff, but the young men that we get a chance getting to know their families and so forth. And Um, I think people are so important, and they're really important as you're building. We always say teams, but the reality is that you're building a family, and families for all of us are so important. This is just a secondary family, and I think that's where you want to go to work every day with those that you're excited to be around, both players, staff, and so I've been fortunate um, to be around great people. I would hope that I've been able to help enhance those experiences and those relationships that I've been associated with, whether it's players, whether it's other coaches, whether it's other administrators, to be around that. And so, that I think is critical, as you really look at having you know kind of some insight, but also some longevity into working in the NCAA, because it's more than just where your feet are. It's trying to make where your feet are a better place. Because somebody told me this a long time ago, is that you want to leave the spot in a better place than when you got there. And there's I've been fortunate. I've moved to different places, that I've moved into some pretty good spots, and some people that have left left things in pretty good positions. And so you try to enhance it, and there's challenges, but to have that mindset every day to make it a little bit better for the next person that gets an opportunity to hold your position.
No, for sure. And I think whoever gave you that advice was a smart man or woman, or maybe it came from your wife as well, as you already mentioned
Yep.
on camera.
You're busting me now.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
busting.
It's on film, so
No.
it's we got the proof.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, but yeah, that, as I said, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time here. I hope you enjoyed going down memory lane a little bit there, kind of through your path to your rise in college hockey. And yeah, best of luck this season and your second season as head coach there in Princeton. I'll be keeping an eye on you guys for sure. And yeah, again, thanks for taking the time.
Oh, Andrew, I can't thank you enough. It's been a lot of fun, and some great questions here that really reflect on for me, for my journey, but also just what really is important, and so forth. So really appreciate your time here today.
And for those listening, if anyone's ever in the Princeton area and you want to get out to see a game, I recommend, college hockey is great to watch, great atmospheres, and where better to watch it than, the historic Princeton. So thanks again, and until next week, tschüss and ciao.